Hey everybody, this is Rob Gauthier, the ET Whisperer. How you guys doing out there tonight? I just wanted to pop in real quick to share something with you that was shared with me by a good friend of ours, William from Fincastle Underground. Some of you guys who are in our Patreon know him. He helps us with the administration on the Q&A and the monthly in-depth topic. For those of you who don't know, he's a dear friend of ours who's helped us a lot in Patreon, and also used to have his own channel which talked about politics, more conservative styles of politics, and he ran a channel called Fincastle Underground, and it was taken down last year, or earlier this year, and he still put up a new channel, but it was a large channel. He had over 17,000 subscribers, and it was taken down. He made a video that has a common link with us. Despite him doing politics, he's a very metaphysical guy, hence the reason he comes over and hangs out with us at ET Whisper. Also the reason that he's very effective at helping with ET Whisper. He's very knowledgeable about metaphysics in general. One of the basis of that knowledge comes from Seth material by Jane Roberts. Also a common link between both of us, with him doing intricate studies of the Seth material in general. Now, he made a recording earlier this year or the end of last year. It was amazing, and it was an excerpts that he personally read directly from the book called The Individual and the Nature of Mass Events, which was a channeled material by Jane Roberts channeling Seth. And it was about those topics, the individual and the nature of mass events. The beautiful part was during the beginning of the pandemic and how things started getting crazy and people got more divided, he took out all the topics that were talked about, specifically about large-term pandemics, endemics, illnesses, yearly illnesses, personal illnesses, the larger collective reasonings why these types of events happen. And this is an extensive reading through all of it. He literally took every reference out of the whole book, extracted it, and put it down this recording. Because his channel got taken down, where he had 17,000 plus subscribers, his second channel doesn't have a large audience. Plus, his target on that channel is mostly people in politics. And because it's conservative, there's a lot of people who lean towards Christianity, which do not accept anything spiritual, new age, metaphysical. So that's why I thought it would be really nice to bring that over with his permission to this channel where people are already open and receptive. Now remember, this is not me expressing anything except for sharing these opinions from Seth, channeled by Jane Roberts. And the reason I want to share it is because all the time our community has been talking about this. It's rarely ever talked about in metaphysical terms. It's talked about in social, governmental, physical well-being and health, and even ethical means, but it's never talked about in a metaphysical standpoint unless you're talking to Aridif or Treb or a few other channeled entities who've taken that side of it compared to the ethical, medical, religious, spiritual, whatever meanings on a lower term. So I think this is a really powerful thing, and I think it's well needed, and I think this audience is well suited for receiving the information here. So we wanted to share it, make sure that this thing gets out to people who are ready to hear it, who want to hear it, and who can find great use of it. I had never heard any of this. I'd only ever read the Seth material and Seth Speaks, so this was all brand new to me. And I always love finding new Seth material. I know I've only read 2 books out of the dozens that Jane Roberts and Seth made together. So even being as new as it was, this is all beautiful. I loved it. I hope you guys love it. Enjoy. We're going to be talking about some of our own stuff on the next video or two. We're going to be bringing out the next couple of videos, and we're also going to be sharing about the calendar update. A lot of you tried to get sessions, couldn't. We're going to get into all that stuff when we get the calendar up. We're going to make a video talking just about that, and also we're going to be sharing some more things as it comes along. So thank you guys for hanging in there. We love you guys. Thanks for your patience, and we'll see you on the other side.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is William with the Fincastle Underground. As I record this video right now, it is April 9th in the year 2020, and I'm stating specifically what the year is because I know that this video will probably outlast the years that I last on this planet. If you're catching this at some time in the distant future, right now is the time that the world itself is enveloped in the coronavirus, which seems to be a mass pandemic. The virus itself, there's no doubt about it that it has been manufactured in a laboratory. Whether it was released on purpose or by accident at this point doesn't really matter. The other thing that's been manufactured is a fear pandemic that has been pushed by the media. I have a very special show for everyone today. It's taken me quite some time to put together, and it is quite long. Not everybody is going to understand it. Not everybody's going to sit through the whole thing. But I'm offering it here for humanity, and I truly mean that. The information that I'm about to give has been given through the centuries, and then it's given again when it's lost. And in my judgment, this is the time to give it again. As I said, it's not going to be for everybody. I hope that you sit here. I hope that you take it in. The whole point of me doing these broadcasts on a daily or weekly basis isn't to talk solely about the news, although that is fun. But the events of the world, the news, are just symptoms of things going on inside of humanity's inner psyche. And so by offering this presentation to you today, I hope to introduce not only new ideas, but a new framework of thinking. So please sit back, enjoy it. If this is something that resonates with you, I can't ask you enough to please share this with other people that you think it might resonate with. If we're ever going to have a true great awakening, it's going to be because of the information and the material found within this video today. Mass events cannot be understood unless they are considered in a far greater context than usual. The question of epidemics, for example, cannot be answered from a biological standpoint alone. It involves great sweeping psychological attitudes on the part of many, and meets the needs and desires of those involved. Needs which, in your terms, arise in a framework of religious, psychological, and cultural realities that cannot be isolated from biological results. There are no closed systems. This also means that in world terms, events spin like electrons, affecting all psychological and psychic systems, as well as biological ones. It is true to say that each individual dies alone, for no one else can die that death. It is also true that part of the species dies with each death, and is reborn with each birth, and that each private death takes place within the great context of the existence of the entire species. The death serves a purpose species-wide, while it also serves the purposes of the individual, for no death comes unbidden. An epidemic, for example, serves the purposes of each individual who is involved, while it also serves its own functions in the greater species framework. When you consider epidemics to be the result of viruses and emphasize their biological stances, then it seems that the solutions are very obvious. You learn the nature of each virus and develop an inoculation, giving each member of the populace a small dose of the disease so that a man's own body will combat it, and he will become immune. The short-sightedness of such procedures is generally overlooked because of the definite short-term advantages. As a rule, for example, people inoculated against polio do not develop that disease. Using such procedures, tuberculosis has been largely conquered. There are great insidious variables operating, however, and these are caused precisely by the small framework in which such mass epidemics are considered. In the first place, the causes are not biological. Biology is simply the carrier of a deadly intent. In the second place, there is a difference between a virus produced in the laboratory and that inhabiting the body, a difference recognized by the body, but not by your laboratory instruments. In a way, the body produces antibodies and sets up natural immunization as a result of, say, inoculation. But the body's chemistry is also confused, for it knows it is reacting to a disease that is not a true disease, but a biologically counterfeit intrusion. To that extent, and I do not mean to overstate the case, The body's biological integrity is contaminated. It may at the same time produce antibodies also, for example, to other similar diseases, and so overextend its defenses that the individual later comes down with another disease. Now, no person becomes ill unless that illness serves a psychic or psychological reason. So many people escape such complications. In the meantime, however, scientists and medical men find more and more viruses against which the population must be inoculated. Each one is considered singly. There is a rush to develop a new inoculation against the newest virus. Much of this is on a predictive basis. The scientists predict how many people might be attacked by, say, a virus that has caused a given number of deaths. Then, as a preventative measure, the populace is invited to the new inoculation. Many people who would not get the disease in any case are then religiously inoculated with it. The body is exerted to use the immune system to the utmost, and sometimes, according to the inoculation, overextend under such conditions. Those individuals who have psychologically decided upon death will die in any case, of that disease or another, or of the side effect of the inoculation. Inner reality and private experience give birth to all mass events. Man cannot disentangle himself from the natural context of his physical life. His culture, his religion, his psychologies, and his psychological nature together form the context within which both private and mass events occur. Dying is a biological necessity, not only for the individual, but to ensure the continued vitality of the species. Dying is a spiritual and psychological necessity, for after a while the exuberant, ever-renewed energies of the spirit can no longer be translated into flesh. Inherently, each individual knows that he or she must die physically in order to survive spiritually and psychically. The self outgrows the flesh. To some degree, epidemics and recognized illnesses serve the sociological purpose of providing an acceptable reason for death, a face-saving device for those who have already decided to die. This does not mean that such individuals make a conscious decision to die, in your terms, but such decisions are often semi-conscious. It might be that those individuals feel they have fulfilled their purposes, but such decisions may also be built upon a different kind of desire for survival than those understood in Darwinian terms. It is not understood that before life an individual decides to live. A self is not simply the accidental personification of the body's biological mechanism. Each person born desires to be born. He dies when that desire no longer operates. No epidemic or illness or natural disaster or stray bullet from a murderer's gun will kill a person who does not want to die. The desire for life has been most flaunted, yet human psychology has seldom dealt with the quite active desire for death. In its natural form, this is not a morbid, frightened, neurotic, or cowardly attempt to escape life, but a definite, positive, healthy acceleration of the desire for survival, in which the individual strongly wants to leave physical life, as once the child wanted to leave the parent's house. I'm not speaking here of the desire for suicide, which involves a definite killing of the body by self-deliberate means, often of a violent nature. Ideally, this desire for death, however, would simply involve the slowing of the body's processes, the gradual disentanglement of psyche from flesh, or in other instances, according to the individual characteristics, a sudden natural stopping of the body's processes. Left alone, the self and the body are so entwined that the separation would be smooth. The body would automatically follow the wishes of the inner self. In the case of suicide, for example, the self is to some extent acting out of context with the body, which still has its own will to live. I will have more to say about suicide, but I do not mean to imply guilt on the part of a person who takes his or her own life. In many cases, a more natural death would have ensued. In any event, as the result of diseases. Often, for example, a person wanting to die originally intended to experience only a portion of Earth life, say childhood. This purpose would be entwined with the parent's intent. Such a son or daughter might be born, for instance, through a woman who wanted to experience childbirth but who did not necessarily want to encounter the years of child raising, for her own reasons. Such a mother would attract a consciousness who desired, perhaps, to re-experience childhood but not adulthood, or who might teach the mother lessons sorely needed. Such a child might naturally die at 10 or 12 or earlier. Yet the ministrations of science might keep the child alive far longer, until such a person begins encountering an adulthood thrust upon him or her, so to speak. An automobile accident, suicide, or another kind of accident might result. The person might fall prey to an epidemic, but the smoothness of biological motion or psychological motion has been lost. I am not here condoning suicide, for too often in your society it is the unfortunate result of conflicting beliefs. And yet it is true to say that all deaths are suicide, and all births deliberate on the part of child and parent. To that extent, you cannot separate issues like a population explosion on the part of certain portions of the world from epidemics, earthquakes, and other disasters. To a certain extent, epidemics are the result of a mass suicide phenomenon on the parts of those involved. Biological, sociological, or even economic factors may be involved, in that, for a variety of reasons and at different levels, whole groups of individuals want to die at any given time, but in such a way that their individual deaths amount to a mass statement. On one level, the deaths are a protest against the time in which they occur. Those involved have private reasons, however. The reasons, of course, vary from one individual to another, yet all involved want their death to serve a purpose, beyond private concerns. Partially, then, such deaths are meant to make the survivors question the conditions, for unconsciously the species well know there are reasons for such mass deaths that go beyond accepted beliefs. In some historical periods, the plight of the poor was so horrible, so unendurable, that outbreaks of the plague occurred, literally resulting in a complete destruction of large areas of the environment in which such social, political, and economic conditions existed. Those plagues took rich and poor alike, however, so the complacent well-to-do could see quite clearly, for example, that to some extent sanitary conditions, privacy, peace of mind had to be granted to the poor alike, for the results of their dissatisfaction would have quite practical results. Those were deaths of protest. Individually, each victim was, to one extent or another, a victim of apathy, despair, or hopelessness, which automatically lowered the bodily defenses. Not only do such states of mind lower the defenses, however, but they activate and change the body's chemistries, alter its balances, and initiate disease conditions. Many viruses inherently capable of causing death in normal conditions contribute to the overall health of the body, existing side by side, as it were, with other viruses, each contributing quite necessary activities that maintain bodily equilibrium. If certain viruses are triggered, however, to higher activity or overproduction by mental states, they then become deadly. Physically, they may be passed on in whatever manner is peculiar to a specific strain. Literally, individual mental problems of sufficient severity emerge as social mass diseases. The environment in which an outbreak occurs points at the political, sociological, and economic conditions that have evolved, causing such disorder. Often, such outbreaks take place after ineffective political or social action, that is, after some unified mass social protest has failed, or is considered hopeless. They often occur also in wartime on the part of a populace that is against a given war in which its country is involved. Initially, there is a psychic contagion. Despair moves faster than a mosquito or any outward carrier of a given disease. The mental state brings about the activation of a virus that is, in those terms, passive. Despair may seem passive only because it feels that exterior action is hopeless, but its fires rage inwardly, and that kind of contagion can leap from bed to bed and from heart to heart. It touches those, however, who are in the same state only, and to some extent it brings about an acceleration in which something can indeed be done in terms of group action. Now, if you believe in one life only, then such conditions will seem most disastrous. And in your terms, they clearly are not pretty. Yet through each victim in an epidemic may die his own death, that death becomes part of a mass social protest. The lives of intimate survivors are shaken, and according to the extent of the epidemic, the various elements of social life itself are disturbed, altered, rearranged. Sometimes such epidemics are eventually responsible for the overthrow of governments, the loss of wars. There are also even deeper biological connections with the heart of nature. You are biological creatures. Your proud human consciousness rests on the vast unconscious integrity of your physical being. In that regard, your consciousness is as natural as your toe. In terms of the species' integrity, your mental states are then highly important. Despair or apathy is a biological enemy. Social conditions, political states, economic policies, and even religious or philosophical frameworks that foster such mental states bring about a biological retaliation. They act like fire applied to a plant. The epidemics then serve many purposes, warning that certain conditions will not be tolerated. There is a biological outrage that will be continually expressed until the conditions are changed. Even in the days of the great plagues in England, there were those smitten who did not die, and there were those untouched by the diseases who dealt with the sick and dying. Those survivors who were actively involved saw themselves in a completely different light than those who succumbed. They were those untouched by despair, who saw themselves as effective rather than ineffective. Often they roused themselves from lives of previously unheroic situations and then performed with great bravery. The horror of the conditions overwhelmed them, where earlier they were not involved. The sight of the dying gave them visions of the meaning of life and stirred new ideas of sociological, political, and spiritual natures, so that in your terms, the dead did not die in vain. Epidemics, by their public nature, speak of public problems that sociologically threaten to sweep the individual to psychic disaster as the physical materialization does biologically. These are the reasons also for the range or the limits of various epidemics, why they sweep through one area and leave another clear, why one in the family will die and another survive. For in this mass venture, the individual still forms his or her private reality. In your scientific society, medical beliefs operate, and a kind of preventative medicine mentioned earlier, in which procedures of inoculation are taking, bringing about in healthy individuals a minute disease condition that then gives immunity against the more massive visitation. In the case of any given disease, this procedure might work quite well for those who believe in it. It is, however, the belief and not the procedure that works. Such medical technology is highly specific, however. You cannot be inoculated with the desire to live, or with the zest, delight, or contentment of the healthy animal. If you have decided to die, protected from one disease in such a manner, you will promptly come down with another or have an accident. The immunization, while specifically effective, may only reinforce prior beliefs about the body's ineffectiveness. It may appear that left alone, the body would surely develop whatever disease might be fashionable at the time, so that the specific victory might result in the ultimate defeat, as far as your beliefs are concerned. You have your own medical systems, however. I do not mean to undermine them, since they are undermining themselves. Some of my statements clearly cannot be proven in your terms and appear almost sacrilegious. Yet throughout your history, no man or woman has died who did not want to die, regardless of the state of medical technology. Specific diseases have certain symbolic meanings, varying with the times and the places. There have been great discussions in past years about the survival of the fittest in Darwinian terms, but little emphasis is placed upon the quality of life or of survival itself. Or in human terms, there has been little probing into the question of what makes life worthwhile. Quite simply, if life is not worthwhile, no species will have a reason to continue. Civilizations are literally social species. They die when they see no reason to live. Yet they seed other civilizations. Your private mental states en masse bring about the mass cultural stance of your civilization. To some extent, then, the survival of your civilization is quite literally dependent upon the condition of each individual, and that condition is initially a spiritual psychic state that gives birth to the physical organism. That organism is intimately connected to the natural biological state of each other person and to each other living thing or entity, however minute. Despite all realistic, pragmatic tales to the contrary, the natural state of life itself is one of joy, acquiescence with itself, a state in which action is effective and the power to act is a natural right. You would see this quite clearly with plants, animals, and all other life if you were not so blinded by beliefs to the contrary. You would feel it in the activity of your bodies, in which the vital individual affirmation of your cells brings about the mass, immensely complicated achievement of your physical being. That activity naturally promotes health and vitality. I am not speaking of some romanticized, passive, floppy spiritual world, but of a clear reality without impediments, in which the opposite of despair and apathy reign. You live in a physical community, but you live first of all in a community of thoughts and feelings. These trigger your physical actions. They directly affect the balance of your body. The experience of the animals is different, yet in their own way animals have both individual intent and purpose. Their feelings are certainly as pertinent as yours. They dream, and in their way, they reason. They do not worry. They do not anticipate disaster when no signs of it are apparent in their immediate environment. On their own, they do not need preventative medicine. Pet animals are inoculated against diseases, however. In your society, this almost becomes a necessity. In a purely natural setting, you would not have as many living puppies or kittens. There are stages of physical existence, and in those terms, nature knows what it is doing. When a species overproduces, the incidences of, say, epidemics grow. This applies to human populations as well as to the animals. The quality of life is important above all. Newborn animals either die quickly and naturally, painlessly, before their consciousness are fully focused here, or are killed by their mothers. Not because they are weak or unfit to survive, but because the physical conditions here are not those that will produce the quality of life that makes survival worthwhile. The consciousness that becomes so briefly physical is not annihilated, however, but in your terms waits for better conditions. There are also trial runs in human and animal species alike, in which peaks are taken, or glimpses of physical life, and that is all. Epidemics sweeping through animal populations are also biological and psychic statements, then, in which each individual knows that only its own greatest fulfillment can satisfy the quality of life on an individual basis, and thus contribute to the mass survival of the species. Suffering is not necessarily good for the soul at all, and left alone, natural creatures do not seek it. There is a natural compassion, a biological knowledge, so that the mother of an animal knows whether or not existing conditions will support the new offspring. Animals instinctively realize their relationship with the great forces of life. They will instinctively starve an offspring while its consciousness is still unfocused, rather than send it loose under adverse conditions. In a natural state, many children would die stillborn for the same reasons, or would be naturally aborted. There is a give and take between all elements of nature, so that such individuals often choose mothers, for example, who perhaps wanted the experience of pregnancy, but not of birth, where they choose the experience of the fetus, but not necessarily that of the child. Often in such cases, these are fragment personalities, wanting to taste physical reality, but not being ready to deal with it. Each case is individual, however, so these are general statements. Many children who, it seems, should have died of disease, of childhood epidemics, nevertheless survive because of their different interests. The world of thought and feeling may be invisible, and yet it activates all physical systems with which you are acquainted. Animals as well as men can indeed make social statements that appear in a biological context. Animals stricken by kitten and puppy diseases, for example, choose to die, pointing out the fact that the quality of their lives, individually and in mass, is vastly lacking. Their relationship with their own species is no longer in balance. They cannot use their full abilities or powers, nor are many of them given compensating elements in terms of a beneficial psychic relationship with man, but instead are shunted aside, unwanted and unloved. An unloved animal does not want to live. Love involves self-respect, the trust in individual biological zest and integrity. To that extent, in their way, animal epidemics have the same causes as human ones. An animal can indeed commit suicide. So can a race or a species. The dignity of a spirited life demands that a certain quality of experience be maintained. Scientists are beginning to understand man's physical relationship with nature. The species is obviously a part of nature, and not apart from it. Environmental questions are being raised about man's effects upon the world in which he lives. There is, however, an inner environment that connects all consciousness that dwell upon your planet in whatever form. This mental or psychic, or in any case non-physical environment, is ever in a state of flux and motion. That activity provides you with all exterior phenomena. Your sense perception, physically speaking, is a result of behavior on the part of organs that seem to you to have no reality outside of their relationship with you. Those organs are themselves composed of atoms and molecules with their own consciousness. They have then their own states of sensation and cognition. They work for you, allowing you to perceive physical reality. Your ears certainly seem to be permanent appendages, and so do your eyes. You say, "My eyes are blue," or "My ears are small." The physical matter of those sense organs change constantly, however, with you none the wiser. While your body appears quite dependable, solid, and steady, you are not aware of the constant interchanges that occur between it and the physical environment. It does not bother you one whit that the physical substance of your body is made up of completely different atoms and molecules than it was composed of 7 years ago, for instance, or that your familiar hands are actually innocent of any of the smallest smidges of matter that composed them, even in the recent past. You perceive your body as solid. Again, the very senses that make such a deduction are the result of the behavior of atoms and molecules literally coming together to form the organs, filling a pattern of flesh. All other objects that you perceive are formed in their own way in the same fashion. The physical world that you recognize is made up of invisible patterns. These patterns are plastic, in that while they exist, their final form is a matter of probabilities directed by consciousness. It is quite obvious that people must die, not only because otherwise you would overpopulate your world into extinction, but because the nature of consciousness requires new experience, challenge, and accomplishment. This is everywhere apparent in nature. If there were no death, you would have to invent it. You are never victims of natural disasters, though it may seem that you are, for you have your hand in forming them. You are creatively involved in the Earth's cycles. No one can be born for you or die for you, and yet no birth or death is really an isolated event, but one in which the entire planet participates. In personal terms, again, each species is concerned not only with survival, but with the quality of its life and experience. In those terms, natural disasters ultimately end up righting a condition that earlier blighted the desired quality of life, so that adjustments are made. The victims choose to participate in those conditions at spiritual, psychological, and biological levels. Many of those who are counted among the fatalities might otherwise die of extended illnesses, for example. At cellular levels, such knowledge is available, and in one way or another imparted, often in dreams, to the individual. Conscious comprehension need not follow, for many people know such things and pretend not to know them at the same time. Others have finished with their challenges. They want to die and are looking for an excuse, a face-saving device. However, those who choose such deaths want to die in terms of drama, in the middle of their activities, are in a strange way filled with the exultant inner knowledge of life's strength, even at the point of death. At the last, they identify with the power of nature that seemingly destroyed them. That identification often brings about in death, but not always, an added acceleration of consciousness, and involves such individuals in a kind of group death experience, where all of the victims more or less embark into another level of reality at the same time. Those people were aware just beneath consciousness of possibilities of an event long before the disaster occurred, and could, until the last moment, choose to avoid the encounter. Animals know of weather conditions ahead of time, as old tales say. This perception is a biological part of your heritage also. A country is responsible for its own droughts, earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, and for its own harvests and rich display of products, its industry and cultural achievements, and each of these elements is related to each other one. If the quality of life that is considered spiritually and biologically necessary fails, then adjustments occur. A political problem might be altered by a natural disaster if political means fail. On the other hand, the rousing creative energies of the people will emerge. Excellence will show itself through the arts, cultural creativity, technological or sociological accomplishments. The species tries to fulfill its greatest capacities. Each physical body, in its own way, is like the world. It has its own defenses and abilities, and each portion of it strives for a quality of existence that will bring to the smallest parts of it the spiritual and biological fulfillment of its own nature. The body's defense system is automatic, and yet, to a certain degree, it is a secondary rather than primary system, coming into mobilization as such only when the body is threatened. The body's main purpose is not only to survive, but to maintain a quality of existence at certain levels, and that quality itself promotes health and fulfillment. A definite, biologically pertinent fear alerts the body and allows it to react completely and naturally. You might be reading a newspaper headline, for example, as you cross a busy street. Long before you are consciously aware of the circumstances, your body might leap out of the path of an approaching car. The body is doing what it is supposed to do. Though consciously you were not afraid, there was a biologically pertinent fear that was acted upon. If, however, you dwell mentally in a generalized environment of fear, the body is given no clear line of action, allowed no appropriate response. Look at it this way. An animal, not necessarily just a wild one in some native forest, but an ordinary dog or cat, reacts in a certain fashion. It is alert to everything in its environment. A cat does not anticipate danger from a caged dog 4 blocks away, however, nor bother wondering what would happen if that dog were to escape and find the cat's cozy yard. Many people, however, do not pay attention to everything in their environments, but through their beliefs concentrate only upon the ferocious dog 4 blocks away. That is, they do not respond to what is physically present or perceivable in either space or time, but instead dwell upon the threats that may or may not exist, ignoring at the same time other pertinent data that are immediately at hand. The mind then signals threat, but a threat that is nowhere physically present, so the body cannot clearly respond. It therefore reacts to a pseudo-threatening situation and is caught between gears, so to speak, with resulting biological confusion. The body's responses must be specific. The overall sense of health, vitality, and resiliency is a generalized condition of contentment, brought about, however, by multitudinous specific responses. Left alone, the body can defend itself against any disease, but it cannot defend itself appropriately against an exaggerated general fear of disease on the individual's part. It must mirror your own feelings and assessments. Usually now, your entire medical systems literally generate as much disease as is cured, for you are everywhere hounded by the symptoms of various diseases and filled with the fear of disease, overwhelmed by what seems to be the body's propensity toward illness, and nowhere is the body's vitality or natural defense system stressed. Private disease, then, happens also in a social context. This context is the result of personal and mass beliefs that are intertwined in all cultural levels, and so, to that extent, serve private and public purposes. The illnesses generally attributed to all different ages are involved. Those of the elderly, again, fit in with your social and cultural beliefs, the structure of your family life. Old animals have their own dignity, and so should old men and women. Senility is a mental and physical epidemic, a needless one. You catch it because when you are young, you believe that old people cannot perform. There are no inoculations against belief systems, so when young people with such beliefs grow old, they become victims. The kinds of diseases change through historical periods. Some become fashionable. Others go out of style. All epidemics, however, are mass statements, both biologically and psychically. They point to mass beliefs that have brought about certain physical conditions that are abhorrent at all levels. They often go hand in hand with war and represent biological protests. Whenever the conditions of life are such that its quality is threatened, there will be such a mass statement. The quality of life must be at certain level so that the individuals of a species, of any and all species, can develop. In our species, the spiritual, mental, and psychic abilities add a dimension that is biologically pertinent. More and more, the quality of your lives is formed through the subjective realities of your feelings and mental constructions. Again, beliefs that foster despair are biologically destructive. They cause the physical system to shut down. If mass action against appalling social or political conditions is not effective, then other means are taken, and these are often in the guise of epidemics or natural disasters. The blight is wiped out in one way or another. Such conditions, however, are the results of beliefs, which are mental, and so the most vital work must always be done in that area. Survival, of course, is important, but it is not the prime purpose of a species, in that it is a necessary means by which that species can attain its main goals. Of course, a species must survive to do so, but it will, however, purposefully avoid survival if the conditions are not practically favorable to maintain the quality of life or existence that is considered basic. A species that senses a lack of this quality can in one way or another destroy its offspring, not because they could not survive otherwise, but because the quality of that survival would bring about vast suffering, for example, so distorting the nature of life as to almost make a mockery of it. The animal knows that he has the right to exist and a place in the fabric of nature. This sense of biological integrity supports him. Man, on the other hand, has more to contend with. He must deal with beliefs and feelings often so ambiguous that no clear line of action seems possible. The body often does not know how to react. If you believe that the body is sinful, for example, you cannot expect to be happy and health will most likely elude you, for your dark beliefs will blemish the psychological and biological integrity with which you were born. You must return, wiser creatures, to the nature that spawned you, not only as loving caretakers, but as partners with the other species of the earth. You must discover once again the spirituality of your biological heritage. The majority of accepted beliefs, religious, scientific, and cultural, have tended to stress a sense of powerlessness, impotence, and impending doom. A picture in which man and his world is an accidental production with little meaning, isolated yet seemingly ruled by a capricious God. Life is seen as a valley of tears, almost as a low-grade infection from which the soul can be cured only by death. Religious, scientific, medical, and cultural communications, such as mainstream media, stress the existence of danger, minimize the purpose of the species or of any individual member of it, or see mankind as the one erratic, half-insane member of an otherwise orderly realm of nature. Any or all of the above beliefs are held by various systems of thought. All of these, however, strain the individual's biological sense of integrity, reinforce ideas of danger, and shrink the area of psychological safety that is necessary to maintain the quality possible in life. The body's defense systems become confused to varying degrees. The body's defenses will take care of themselves if they are allowed to, and if the psychological air is cleared of the true carriers of disease. You get what you concentrate upon. Your mental images bring about their own fulfillment. These are ancient dictums, but you must understand the ways in which your mass communication systems amplify both the positive and the negative issues. I may for a while stress the ways in which individuals, and as a civilization, you have undermined your own feelings of safety. Yet I will also give you methods to reinforce those necessary feelings of biological integrity and spiritual comprehension that can vastly increase your spiritual and physical existence. Your beliefs have generated feelings of unworth. Having artificially separated yourselves from nature, you do not trust it, but often experience it as an adversary. Your religions granted man a soul while denying any to any other species. Your bodies then were relegated to nature and your souls to God, who stood immaculately apart from his creation. Your scientific beliefs tell you that your entire world happened accidentally. Your religions tell you that man is sinful, the body is not to be trusted, the senses can lead you astray. In this maze of beliefs, you have largely lost the sense of your own worth and purpose. A generalized fear and suspicion is generated, and life too often becomes stripped of any heroic qualities. The body cannot react to generalized threats. It is therefore put under constant strain in such circumstances, and seeks to specify the danger. It is geared to act in your protection. It builds up strong stresses, therefore, so that on many occasions a specific disease or threat situation is manufactured to rid the body of a tension grown too strong to bear. Many of you are familiar with private meditation, when concentration is focused in one particular area. There are many methods and schools of thought here, but a highly suggestive state of mind results, in which spiritual, mental, and physical goals are sought. It is impossible to meditate without a goal, for that intent is in itself a purpose. Unfortunately, many of your public health programs and commercial statements through the various media provide you with mass meditations of a most deplorable kind. I refer to those in which the specific symptoms of various diseases are given, in which the individual is further told to examine the body with those symptoms in mind. I also refer to those statements that just as unfortunately specify diseases for which the individual may experience no symptoms of an observable kind, but is cautioned that these disastrous physical events may be happening despite his or her feelings of good health. Here, the generalized fears fostered by religious, scientific, and cultural beliefs are often given as blueprints of diseases, in which a person can find a specific focus. The individual can then say, "Of course I feel listless or panicky or unsafe, since I have such and such disease." The breast cancer suggestions associated with self-examinations have caused more cancers than any treatments have cured. They involve intense meditation of the body and adverse imagery that itself affects the bodily cells. Public health announcements about high blood pressure themselves raise the blood pressure of millions of television viewers. Your current ideas of preventative medicine, therefore, generate the very kind of fear that causes disease. They all undermine the individual's sense of bodily security and increase stress, while offering the body a specific detailed disease plan. Most of all, they operate to increase the individual's sense of alienation from the body and to promote a sense of powerlessness and duality. Medical commercials are equally disease-promoting. Many, meaning to offer you relief through a product, instead actually promote the condition through suggestion, thereby generating a need for the product itself. Headache remedies are a case in point here. Nowhere do any medically oriented commercial or public service announcements mention the body's natural defenses, its integrity, vitality, or strength. Nowhere in your television or radio matter is any emphasis put upon the healthy. Medical statistics deal with the diseased. Studies upon the healthy are not carried out. More and more foods, drugs, and natural environmental conditions are being added to the list of disease-causing elements. Different reports place dairy products, red meats, coffee, tea, eggs, and fats on the list. Generations before you managed to subsist on many such foods, and they were in fact promoted as additive to health. Indeed, man almost seems to be allergic to his own natural environment, a prey to the weather itself. It is true that your food contains chemicals that it did not in years past. Yet, within reason, man is biologically capable of assimilating such materials and using them to his advantage. When man feels powerless, however, and in a state of generalized fear, he can even turn the most natural earthly ingredients against himself. At best, the public service announcements introduce the doctor as a mediator. You are supposed to take care of your body and take your body to a doctor as you take your car to a garage to have its parts serviced. Your body is seen as a vehicle out of control that needs constant scrutiny. The doctor is like a biological mechanic who knows your body far better than you. Now, these medical beliefs are intertwined with your economic and cultural structures, so you cannot lay the blame upon medical men or their profession alone. Your economic well-being is also a part of your personal reality. Many dedicated doctors use medical technology with spiritual understanding, and they are themselves the victims of the beliefs they hold. If you do not buy the headache potions, your uncle or your neighbor may be out of business and not able to support his family, and therefore lack the means to buy your products or services. You cannot disconnect one area of life from another. In mass, your private beliefs form your cultural reality. Your society is not a thing in itself apart from you, but the result of the individual beliefs of each person in it. There is no stratum of society that you do not in one way or another affect. Your religions stress sin. Your medical profession stresses disease. Your orderly sciences stress the chaotic and accidental theories of creation. Your psychology stress men as the victims of their backgrounds. Your most advanced thinkers emphasize man's rape of the planet, or focus upon the future disaster that will overtake the world, or see men once again as victims of the stars. Earth life is seen as murky, a dim translation of greater existence, rather than portrayed as the unique creative living experience that it should be. The body becomes disoriented, sabotaged. The clear lines of communication between spirit and body become cluttered. Individually and collectively, diseases and conditions result that are meant to lead you into other realizations. You may hear yearly announcements that the flu season has officially begun. The flu season is, in a way, an example of a psychologically manufactured pattern that can, at times, bring about a manufactured epidemic. Behind such announcements, there is the authority of the medical profession, and the very authority of your systems of communication as well. You cannot question the voice over the radio. It is disembodied and presumes to know. Once again, the elderly are singled out. It seems obvious that they are more susceptible to diseases. That susceptibility is a medical fact of life. It is a fact, however, without a basic foundation in the truth of man's biological reality. It is a fact brought about through suggestion. The doctors see the bodily results, which are quite definite, and then those results are taken as evidence. In a few isolated areas of the world, even today, the old are not disease-ridden, nor do their vital signs weaken. They remain quite healthy until the time of death. Their belief system, therefore, you must admit, are quite practical, nor are they surrounded by medical professions. Here, through mainstream media, you have, however, what almost amounts to a social program for illness, the flu season, a mass meditation. It has an economic structure in back of it. The scientific and medical foundations are involved. Not only this, however, but the economic concerns, from the largest pharmacies to the tiniest drugstores, the supermarkets and the corner groceries. All of these elements are involved. Pills, potions, and shots supposed to combat colds and the flu are given prominent displays, serving to remind those who might have missed them otherwise of the announcements about the coming time of difficulty. Commercials on television bring a new barrage, so that you can go from the hay fever season to the flu season without missing any personal medications. A cough in June may be laughed off and quickly forgotten. A cough in the flu season, however, is far more suspect, and under such conditions, one might think, particularly in the midst of a poor week, who wants to go out tomorrow anyhow? You are literally expected to come down with the flu. It can serve as an excuse for not facing many kinds of problems. Many people are almost consciously aware of what they are doing. All they have to do is pay attention to the suggestions offered so freely by the society. Then the temperature does rise. Concern causes the throat to become dry. Dormant viruses, which up until now have done no harm, are activated, all stemming from belief rather than biology. Coat, glove, and boot manufacturers also push their wares. Yet in those categories there is more sanity, for their ads often stress wholesome activities, portraying the happy skier, the tramper through the woods in winter. Sometimes, however, they suggest that their wares will protect you against the flu and colds, and against the vulnerability of your nature. The inoculations themselves do little good overall, and they can be potentially dangerous, particularly when they are given to prevent an epidemic which has not yet in fact occurred. They may have specific value, but overall they are detrimental, confusing bodily mechanisms and setting off other biological reactions that might not show up, say, for some time. The flu season intersects with the Christmas season, of course, when Christians are told to be merry and wish their fellows a happy return to the natural wonders of childhood. In thought, at least. They are also told to pay homage to God. Christianity has become, however, a tangled, sorry tale. Its cohesiveness largely vanished. Such a religion becomes isolated from daily life. Many individuals cannot unify the various areas of their belief and feeling, and at Christmas they partially recognize the vast gulf that exists between their scientific beliefs and their religious beliefs. They find themselves unable to cope with such a mental and spiritual dilemma. A psychic depression often results, one that is deepened by the Christmas music and the commercial displays, by the religious reminders that the species is made in God's image, and by the other reminders that the body so given is seemingly incapable of caring for itself and is a natural prey to disease and disaster. So the Christmas season carries man's hopes in your society, and the flu season mirrors his fears and shows the gulf between the two. The physician is also a private person, so I speak of him only in his professional capacity, for he usually does the best he can in the belief system that he shares with his fellows. Those beliefs do not exist alone, but are of course intertwined with religious and scientific ones, as separate as they might appear. Christianity has conventionally treated illness as the punishment of God, or as a trial sent by God, to be borne stoically. It has considered man a sinful creature, flawed by original sin, forced to work by the sweat of his brow. Science has seen man as an accidental product of an uncaring universe, a creature literally without a center of meaning, where consciousness was the result of a physical mechanism that only happened to come into existence, and that he had no reality outside of that structure. Science has at least been consistent in that respect. Christianity, however, officially asks children of sorrow to be joyful, and sinners to find a childlike purity. It asks them to love a God who one day will destroy the world, and who will condemn them to hell if they do not adore him. Many people, caught between such conflicting beliefs, fall prey to physical ills during the Christmas season particularly. You cannot divorce your private value systems from your health, and the hospitals often profit from the guilt that religions have instilled in their people. Life is a gift and not a curse. I am a unique, worthy creature in the natural world, which everywhere surrounds me, gives me sustenance, and reminds me of the greater source from which I myself and the world both emerge. My body is delightfully suited to its environment, and comes to me again from that unknown source, which shows itself through all of the events of the physical world. That feeling gives the organism the optimism, the joy, and the ever-abundant energy to grow. It encourages curiosity and creativity, and places the individual in a spiritual world and a natural one at once. Organized religions are always attempts to redefine that kind of feeling in cultural terms. They seldom succeed because they become too narrow in their concepts, too dogmatic, and the cultural structures finally overweigh the finer substance within them. The more tolerant a religion is, the closer it comes to expressing those inner truths. The individual, however, has a private biological and spiritual integrity that is a part of man's heritage, and is indeed any creature's right. Man cannot mistrust his own nature and at the same time trust the nature of God. For God is his word for the source of his being, and if his being is tainted, then so must be his God. Your private beliefs merge with those of others and form your cultural reality. The distorted ideas of the medical profession, or the scientists, or of any other group are not thrust upon you, therefore. They are the result of your mass beliefs, isolated in the form of separate disciplines. Medical men, for example, are often extremely unhealthy because they are so saddled with those specific health beliefs that their attention is concentrated in that area more than others so not involved. The idea of prevention is always based upon fear, for you do not want to prevent something that is joyful. Often, therefore, preventative medicine causes what it hopes to avoid. Not only does the idea of prevention continually promote the entire system of fear, but specific steps taken to prevent a disease in a body not already stricken, again, often set up reactions that bring about side effects that would occur if the disease had in fact been suffered. Physicians, of course, are also constantly at the beck and call of many people who will take no responsibility at all for their own well-being, who will plead for operations they do not need. The physician is also visited by people who do not want to get well, and use the doctor and his methods as justification for further illness, saying things like, "The doctor is no good," or "The medicine will not work," therefore blaming the doctor for a way of life that they have no intention of changing. The physician is also caught between his religious beliefs and his scientific beliefs. Sometimes these conflict, and sometimes they only serve to deepen his feelings that the body, left alone, will get any disease possible. Again, you cannot separate your systems of values and your most intimate philosophical judgments from the other areas of your private or mass experience. In this country, your tax dollars go for many medical experiments and preventative medicine drives, because you do not trust the good intent of your own bodies. In the same way, your government funds also go into military defenses to prevent war, because if you do not trust your own body's good intent towards you, you can hardly trust any good intent on the part of your fellow men. In fact, then, preventative medicine and outlandish expenditures for preventative defense are quite similar. In each case, there is the anticipation of disaster. In one case, from the familiar body, which can be attacked by deadly diseases at any time, and is seemingly at least without defenses. And in the other case, from the dangers without, exaggerated, ever-threatening, and ever to be contended with. Diseases must be combated, fought against, assaulted, wiped out. In many ways, the body becomes almost like an alien battleground, for many people trust it so little that it becomes highly suspect. Man then seems pitted against nature. Some people think of themselves as patients, as others, for example, might think of themselves as students. Such people are those who are apt to take preventative medicines and measures against whatever disease is in fashion or in season, and hence take the brunt of medicine's unfortunate aspects when there is no cause. All viruses of any kind are important to the stability of your planetary life. They are a part of the planet's biological heritage and memory. You cannot eradicate a virus, though at any given time you destroy every member alive of any given strain. Viruses exist in the Earth's memory, to be recreated as they were before whenever the need arises. The same applies, of course, to any animal or plant considered extinct. Only an objectively tuned consciousness like mankind's would imagine that the physical eradication of a species destroyed its existence. You could not live without viruses, nor could your biological reality as you know it now exist. Viruses appear to be the bad guys, and as a rule you think of them separately, as for example the smallpox virus. There are overall affiliations in which viruses take part, however, in which delicate balances are maintained biologically. Each body contains countless viruses that could be deadly at any given time and under certain conditions. These, and I'm putting it as simply as possible, take turns being active or inactive within the body in accordance with the body's overall condition. Viruses that are deadly in certain stages are not in others, and in those later stages they react biologically in quite beneficial ways, adding to the body's stability by bringing about necessary changes, say in cellular activities that are helpful in a given rate of action. These in turn trigger other cellular changes, again of a beneficial nature. As an example from another field, consider poisons. Belladonna can be quite deadly, yet small doses of it were known to aid the body in disease conditions. The viruses in the body have a social, cooperative existence. Their effects become deadly only under certain conditions. The viruses must be triggered into destructive activity, and this happens only at a certain point, when the individual involved is actively seeking either death or a crisis situation biologically. The initial contagion in such cases is always emotional and mental. Social conditions are usually involved, so that an individual is, say, at the lower end of a poor social environment, a seeming victim of it, or in a situation where his individual value as a social member is severely weakened. In the same way that a member of a society can go askew or commit antisocial acts, so in the same fashion, such a person can instead trigger the viruses, wreck their own biological social order, so that some of the virus suddenly become deadly or run amok. It seems quite scientific to believe in inoculations against such dangerous diseases. And certainly, scientifically, inoculations seem to work. People in our time right now are not plagued by smallpox, for example. Some cultures have believed that illnesses were caused by demons. Medicine men, through certain ceremonies, would try to rid the body of the demons, and those methods worked also. The belief system was tight and accepted, and it only began to fail when those societies encountered civilized views. If you call the demons negative beliefs, however, then you have taken strides forward. People continue to die of diseases. Many of your scientific procedures, including inoculations of themselves, cause new disease. It does not help a patient inoculated against smallpox and polio if eventually he dies of cancer as a result of his negative beliefs. What I have said about viruses applies to all biological life. Viruses are highly intelligent, meaning that they react quickly to stimuli. They are responsive to emotional states. They are social. Their scale of life varies considerably, and some can be inactive for centuries and revive. They have extensive memory patterns, biologically imprinted. Some can multiply in the tens of thousands within seconds. They are, in many ways, the basis of biological life. But you are aware of them only when they show a deadly face. You are not aware of the inner army of viruses within the body that protect it constantly. Host and virus both need each other, and both are part of the same life cycle. You think of viruses as physical, and of thoughts as mental. You should know that thoughts also have their physical aspects in the body, and that viruses have their mental aspects in the body. It is not just that thoughts influence the body, as of course they do, but each one of them represents a triggering stimulus, bringing about hormonal changes and altering the entire physical situation at any given time. Your physical body is an entity, the fleshed out version, the physically alive version of the body of your thoughts. It is not that your thoughts just trigger chemical reactions in the body, but that your thoughts have a chemical reality besides their recognizable mental aspects. I will have to use an analogy. It's not the best, but I hope it will get the point across. It is as if your thoughts turned into the various appendages of your body. They have an invisible existence within your body as surely as viruses do. Your body is composed not only of the stuff within it that, say, X-rays or autopsies can reveal, but it also involves profound relationships, alliances, and affiliations that nowhere physically show. Your thoughts are physically pertinent to your body as viruses are, as alive and self-propagating, and they themselves form inner affiliations. Their vitality automatically triggers all of the body's inner responses. When you think thoughts, they are conscious. You think in sentences or paragraphs or perhaps in images. Those thoughts, as clearly as I can explain, rise from inner components of which you are unaware. When the thought is thought, it is, say, broken down again to those components. Your thoughts have an emotional basis also. The smallest cell within your body contributes to that emotional reality and reacts instantly to your thoughts. In those terms, thoughts move far quicker, of course, than viruses. The action of the virus follows the thought. Each thought is registered biologically. Basically, when you have an immunity to a disease, you have a mental immunity. Your body is the physical mirror of your psychological state. It is powered by the energy of the universe. It actually springs into being in each moment. Your mind and your body come from the same source, from universal energy. You are powered with vitality. You must seek meaning in your lives. When you lose the sense of life's meaning, for whatever reason, this is reflected in your body. It is very difficult to separate all of this from the many connotations placed about disease, and I do not want this material to be misread. Cancer, for example, has become the symbol for the body's vulnerability in current years, the proof of man's susceptibility to the body. It is a disease that people have when they want to die, when they are ashamed to admit that they want to die, because death seems to fly against sane behavior. If the species struggles to survive, then, how can individuals want to die? I am aware of the tormenting questions involved with such issues, and also of the gap between my explanations and the daily experiences of many people. The fact is that when death comes, it is wanted. It has been chosen. The fact is that death, in its own way, is the culmination of life, leading toward a new birth and new experience. The cells know this, so does the heart. People cannot admit that they want to die at certain times. If they could accept the fact of their own wishes, some could even change their minds. Many do. The psychological condition changes for the better, and the body cells are no longer amiable to the cancerous condition. In a way, the very pain of cancer, of some cancers, often acts through its intensity as a reflection of the person's belief that life is painful, tormenting. At the same time, the pain is a reminder of feeling and sensation. I realize that current experiences may perhaps seem contradictory to some of these ideas, so bear with me. I will, therefore, combine the idea of a disease with the idea of creativity, for the two are intimately connected. Every person paints his or her own portrait in living color. A portrait that does not simply sit in a tranquil pose at a table, but one that has the full capacity for action. Those of you now living, say, are in the same life class. You look about to see how your contemporaries are getting along with their portraits, and you find multitudinous varieties: tragic self-portraits, heroic self-portraits, comic self-portraits. And all of these portraits are alive and interacting, and as they interact, they form the planetary, mass social, and political events of your world. These portraits obviously have a biological reality. In a manner of speaking now, each person dips into the same supplies of paint and so forth, which are the elements out of which your likenesses emerge. There must be great creative leeway allowed for such portraits. Each one interacting with each other one helps form the psychological and physical reality of the species. So you are somehow involved in the formation of a multitudinous number of portraits. I simply want you to keep that analogy in the background. These portraits, however, are the result of creativity so inborn and miraculous that they are created automatically, an automatic art. At certain levels, the species is always creatively embarked upon alternative versions of itself. The overall patterns will remain. Biological integrity is everywhere sustained. What you think of as diseases, however, are quite creative elements, working at different levels, and at many levels at once. Many viruses are vital to physical existence, and, in your terms, there are gradations of activity, so that only under certain conditions do viruses turn into, say, what you think of as deadly ones. The healthiest body contains within it many so-called deadly viruses in what you may call an inactive form. Inactive from your viewpoint in that they are not causing disease. They are, however, helping to maintain the body's overall balance. In a way, in each body, the species settles upon a known status quo, and yet experiments creatively at many levels with cellular alterations, chromosomal variations, so that, of course, each body is unique. There are kinds of gradations, say, in the lines and kinds of disease. Certain diseases can actually strengthen the body from a prior weaker state by calling upon the body's full defenses. Under certain conditions, some so-called disease states could ensure the species' survival. In a way, some disease states help to ensure the survival of the species, not by weeding out the sickly, but by introducing into large numbers of individuals the conditions needed to stabilize other strains within the species that need to be checked, or to naturally inoculate the species against a sensed greater danger. At the minute levels, microscopic levels, there are always some biological experiments being carried out in a creative effort to give the species as much leeway as possible for effective action. Your body is changed biologically by your thoughts. Your thoughts affect your cells, again, and they can change what are thought of as hereditary factors. Your imaginations are intimately connected with your diseases, just as your imaginations are so important in all other areas of your lives. You form your being by imaginatively considering such and such a possibility, and your thoughts affect your body in that regard. In a way, illness is a tool used on behalf of life, for people have given it social, economic, psychological, and religious connotations. It becomes another area of activity and of expression. At microscopic levels, there is no rigid self-structure like your own. There is identity. A cell does not fear its own death. Its identity has traveled back and forth from physical to non-physical reality too often as a matter of course. All biological organisms know that physical life depends upon a constant transformation of consciousness and form. In your terms, I am saying, of course, that physically death gives life. This biological knowledge is intimately acknowledged at microscopic levels. Even your cells know that their deaths are necessary for the continuation of your physical form. The entire orientation is strange or alien only to your conscious belief systems. In one way or another, most people are aware of a desire for death before they die, a desire they usually do not consciously acknowledge. To a large measure, the sensations of pain are also the results of your belief, so that even diseases that are indeed accompanied now by great pain need not be. Obviously, I am saying that deadly viruses do not think of themselves as killers any more than a cat does when it devours a mouse. The mouse may die, and a cell might die as a result of the virus, but the connotations applied to such events are also the results of beliefs. In the greater sphere of spiritual and biological activity, the viruses are protecting life at their level and in the capacity given them. In one way or another, viruses are always invited. Again, always invited, in response to that greater rhythm of existence in which physical life is dependent upon constant transformation of consciousness and form. In the entire natural scheme, and at all levels, even social or economic ones, disease always has its own creative basis. Abnormalities of any kind in birth always represent probable versions of the species itself, and they are kept in the gene pool to provide a never-ending bank of alternatives. To change the world for the better, you must begin by changing your own life. There is no other way. You begin by accepting your own worth as a part of the universe and by granting every other being that same recognition. You begin by honoring life in all of its forms. You begin by changing your thoughts toward your contemporaries, your country, your family, your working companions. If the ideal of loving your neighbor like yourself seems remote, you will at least absolutely refrain from killing your neighbor. And your neighbor is any other person on the face of the planet. For a start, you will acknowledge your existence in the framework of nature. And to do that, you must recognize the vast cooperative processes that connect each species with each other one. If you truly use your prerogatives as an individual in your country, then you can exert far more power in normal daily living than you do now. Every time you affirm the rightness of your own existence, you help others. Your mental states are part of the planet's psychic atmosphere. In your lives, anything you want is possible within the contours of your natures, if only you understand that this is so. Many of you keep searching for some seemingly remote spiritual inner self that you can trust and look to for help and support, but all the while you distrust the familiar self with which you have such intimate contact. You set up divisions between portions of the self that are unnecessary. There is no civilization, no system of science, art, or philosophy that did not originate in the mind. When you give lip service to ideas with which you do not agree, you are betraying your own ideals, harming yourself to some extent, and society as well, insofar as you are denying yourself and society the benefit of your own understanding. Each person alive helps paint the living picture of civilization as it exists at any given time, in your terms. Be your own best artist. Your thoughts, feelings, and expectations are like the living brushstrokes with which you paint your corner of life's landscape. If you do your best in your own life, then you are indeed helping to improve the quality of all life. Your thoughts are as real as snowflakes or raindrops or clouds. They mix and merge with the thoughts of others to form man's living scape, providing the vast mental elements from which physical events will be formed. Your changed beliefs will affect the mental atmosphere of your nation and of the world. You must encounter the selves that you are now. Acknowledge your impulses. Explore their meanings. Rely upon yourselves. You will find far greater power, achievement, and virtue than you suppose.